Well, welcome. Tonight we have somebody that we all want to get to know. One of the people who is the rare people who not only have ideas and have suggestions, but stand up and say, put me in, I'll make a difference. So why don't we start with an introduction and you can explain what you're running for and why.
Well, Al, it's such a treat to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me on. And it's good to be here in the beautiful city of Milford. I actually know the city well, so I look forward to sharing my story. Just a little background on me. I arrived in Massachusetts in 1987 to go to Harvard Business School with my wife, Leslie. We had just gotten married, and we arrived here with nothing other than what we could load into our car. We lived in Boston and Cambridge, and we ended up settling here in Rentham, not far from here. We raised our 6 children, all in the public schools, and we're now grandparents of 4. In the early 90s, I bought into a small little manufacturing company outside of Boston in Jamaica Plain that made small metal parts for locks and typewriters. People don't remember typewriters. I made parts for typewriters. And it was in the early 90s. And over the course of a career, it grew it to about 700 employees. We had 6 manufacturing facilities around the U.S. We ended up making a lot of auto parts and truck parts and tractor parts. So the big names would be General Motors, Ford, Chrysler, Caterpillar, John Deere, and those sort of iconic American brands. And in December of this last year, I retired from the business completely. We had sold some of the business itself so that I could run for governor. The reason I decided to run for governor is because I like to solve problems, and I see some problems cropping up in our state. And I feel like I have the skills, the energy, the experience to begin solving some of those problems. And so that's why I'm here. Now, I have passions for many of the problems, but let me highlight just a few, and we can talk about some of them tonight. But one is education for our children. So, as a father and a grandfather, I have in my heart the responsibility we have as this generation to make sure that we have the best schools in America. Our schools used to be the very best. The jewels of American education were here in Massachusetts. And I have felt erosion in some of the cities and in some of the towns with our schooling. And I want to fix that. Also, the affordability problems in our state. Almost everything that we purchase in Massachusetts, we are in the top 1, 2, or 3 most expensive in America. Almost groceries, medical, transportation, housing, you name it, and we're paying more than most Americans are paying for it. And that's making it very difficult for our citizens and also extremely difficult for our businesses, many of which have had to leave. Also, I worry about public safety. I think safety is so important, particularly in our inner cities where the police are being defunded and demeaned, and I want to fix that problem as well. The last thing I have a passion for is to not waste people's money. And I believe that our state government is wasting so much money. And this is impacting our taxpayers. I think we pay too much in taxes for what we're getting. And I want to go in and fix it, just like a finance and budget man that I am, to go in and go through all of our expenses and make sure that the money's going where it should, not going to just overhead, but actually getting to the areas where it needs to go. So those are some of my passions, and I hope I can present that message to the voters and that those that agree with my passions would vote for me.
So now you bring up an interesting point. Massachusetts is not known as a stronghold for the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yet we seem to like to elect Republican governors. I mean, I find it amazing that Charlie is one of the most popular governors in the country and one of the most blue states of the country.
Yeah.
Why?
You know, we're an educated state. And I think the citizens of our state understand the importance of balance. Balance in our lives, but also balance in organizations and balance in government. I think people recognize that having just one view, one worldview, creates worse policy. It creates overspending. It can create higher debt levels. I think there needs to be debate and discussion. I've heard Governor Baker say a number of times there needs to be two teams on the field. And that's true. Imagine if the Patriots only played themselves. How strong would they be? And I think having that debate and that discussion from these two worldviews of conservatism or stable society versus liberalism and progressive to make changes, I think you have to find the balance between those two. And I think having a Republican governor offers that up. I can tell you that I was a business owner during Deval Patrick. So in my 30 years or 35 plus years, we've only had a Democratic governor or a liberal governor for one 8-year period. And everyone that was in business can tell you during that 8-year period, it became really, really difficult to operate our businesses because the DEP, OSHA, EPA, the taxes, everything went up. If you remember, if you look back, there was only one time in that 30-year period that we had a significant tax increase, and it was during Deval Patrick's time. And I think we lost that debate, right, that we need. And so I think the citizens recognize that there should be one person that has a calculator that can run a spreadsheet and can look at things to make sure we can do it and we can afford it. Because so many of the things we want to do in our state are good, but they're just expensive. And so I think there needs to be someone that keeps an eye on the budget and on the finances of the state and make sure that we can afford what we want to do.
One of the areas that is having a major impact on us is inflation. Another one is immigration. I mean, we can go through these, but let me take a step back and say, Chris, what is a governor? What's the job in your view? If you're governor, what would you do?
Yeah. Well, I wrote a job description early on to figure out what exactly is a governor, because it's such a good question. In short, the governor is the CEO of state government. It's the largest corporation in the state. It's about $50 billion in revenue. It's 44,000 employees. It's 351 individual towns, including Milford. There's the MBTA. There's all the quasi-government institutions, universities and colleges. It's a large, complex, sprawling organization. It is, it's hard to run. It's a hard organization to run. But so is my business, making auto parts in the U.S. for auto manufacturers. And so I think we look for governors that can handle complexity, that can listen, that are able to work across the aisleways, can solve problems, but be visionaries and be leaders and say, here's where we want to go, let's go here. I have been doing that my whole life. That's my life story, is leading a group of people from all disciplines and all walks of life, a certain direction, and say we should go here so that we're prosperous. Not just me, but all of us. I have always wanted all of my employees to do well financially and with their families and their children, and to feel, the prosperity of America. And so I think we look for a governor that can do that, and I hope I can do that for our state.
Now, one of the challenges, obviously, is you would be governor, not president. So you're limited. We talk about immigration.
Yeah.
One solution can't be you deport everybody to Rhode Island. Immigration has hit us all. Now, many of us are immigrants.
Yep.
My grandfather came to Milford in 1939, and he got a start, and people helped him, and my mother followed, and here we are.
Yeah.
4 generations into Milford.
Yeah.
What could you do concerning immigration?
Yeah, well, first let me just say I am a huge believer in legal immigration. In fact, I have about 300 immigrants in Rentham that work for me. So it's not just theoretical for me. It is my life. These are my friends and my colleagues. I speak Spanish every day. I speak a little Portuguese. So I am with the immigrant community, so I believe deeply in legal immigration. I don't believe that we should promote illegal immigration. I don't believe we should give driver's licenses. I don't think we should give benefits to those that are here illegally. And here's my reasoning, is that immigration is a federal policy and federal laws around immigration. I think when states like ours say, well, we're going to give benefits, we're going to give driver's licenses, we break the rule of law. The fact that we're frustrated with immigration on a federal level doesn't mean that we should break the law. Can you imagine if society said, well, just obey the laws that you're not frustrated with? It would be chaos. So as a society, we have to follow the federal laws, even if we don't like them. I was trying to do some research on this, Al, in looking at developed nations, how many developed nations have rogue states that go against the rule of law of their own nation? I can't find any. I
But-
cannot find a single country where the states go rogue from the federal policies with immigration. So I think it's wrong for us. And so right now there's a push afoot to repeal this new law that gives driver's license to the illegal immigrants. It'll require 50,000 signatures, and we only have a couple months. So I think as citizens, we should all get behind that and say, let's get out there and get those signatures to try and hold back, or at least make that a ballot question that goes before the citizens. Now, what do we do about the immigration problem? Because it's a federal problem. Now, there are about 17 governors that have come together and said, okay, if the federal government can't fix this, then we'll come together to help them fix it. Because frankly, it's not that complicated of a problem. It's just hard to get everyone to agree. On day one as governor, I'm going to call up those other governors and say, include me in it. Put me on that, on this task force that you're working on to help the federal government solve the immigration problems. That's one thing I can do. The other thing is we can begin making it easier for those that want legal immigration. You know, it's not that difficult to become a legal immigrant. We just have to, I think, put the resources and the help and help people become legal immigrants to our state.
Well, I've always had a soft spot since my family is in America, since we're here, because somebody gave us a chance.
Yeah.
But we've always followed the law. You know, and I don't understand why, if you're immigrating into our country and breaking the law, that I should have any sympathy for you. You know, if I invite you into dinner, you start breaking my furniture, I think I got the right to ask you to leave my house. So,
Yeah. I think it's important for all of us to get frustrated with the problem, not the people. I don't think we should be frustrated with the immigrants. I don't think we should be frustrated with other political persuasions. We need to be frustrated with the problem. Imagine this like a business problem. And I've had so many business problems in my life. I never went after the people. It was always the problem to focus on. I hope as governor I can talk in a way that says, look, let's not be divisive between each other, and let's not create divisions between us and those that are here illegally. Let's be very focused on solving the problem. And you know, we're all frustrated with the federal immigration the way it is, but let's go fix that. Now, there's things a governor can do, but the voters, it's the way democracy works, right? Is that we have to elect people that can solve problems. And so that's another thing we can do. When you go to the ballot box, elections matter. And now that I'm out of my business life and I'm running as a politician, I can see how important elections are. And so we vote. That's the way democracy works. It's slow. Like to fix immigration, we all recognize it's going to take time to fix it, but we as voters can fix it by voting for the right people to go in and solve the problems.
see, I can understand your point of saying don't pick on the person. I don't know what I would do if I couldn't feed my family. I don't know what I would do if my family was
Yeah.
in danger every day.
Yeah.
I mean, thank God I've never had that problem in Milford. But I got to believe that if I had to, I'd walk 1,000 miles. So I have a hard time blaming
Yeah.
the immigrants who are here following the rules. Even though they're illegal,
Yeah.
I don't have anything against them. I don't like the fact that we're letting in thousands I mean, I read that we're going to have pretty close to 2 million illegal immigrants. I mean, we only have 300 million people.
Right.
So having total open borders scares the living heck out of me.
Yeah. And it should. It should. It's been said that you cannot be a welfare state with open borders, and that's true. It just doesn't make sense to any of us. And so we have to fix it. And, you know, my commitment as governor is on day one, I'm going to start working on this, but never to attack the people. To your point, that's not where I come from. I'm not here to attack people. I'm here to fix problems. And just like a CEO that you hire, they come in not to attack people, but to solve problems that the corporation has or that exists. And we have issues in our state, but every state does. And so I just feel ready. I feel like I got the energy, the smarts, the capability to come in and start fixing problems.
Well, you mentioned the law. Milford's been pretty clear on its view. Now, our previous police chief and the one before that, tended to hire local people
That's good.
with ties to Milford that could speak Portuguese, Spanish, English. And it's funny because we've had 2 demonstrations concerning our police, both positive. Last year, we had a town meeting member get up, and when we were going through the budget, asked that the police budget be removed and defunded. I've never heard our town meeting so quiet. It was like crickets. Couldn't even get, we got 200 people, different views all over, but you couldn't even get a second to support the idea of taking away from our officers.
Yeah. Yeah, to the people of Milford, well done. Well done to the people of Milford, because in other parts of the state, this is a real issue. In Boston, the crime rate, I would project or predict that this summer will be one of the highest crime rates in our history in the city of Boston.
Really?
Yeah. It's for several factors. One is that they're severely understaffed, and they're understaffed because they feel demeaned and unsupported. So a lot of the police officers are moving from Boston out to communities like Milford that they feel supported in. Imagine if you're a police officer, how you'd want to go to a community where you feel supported. That's problem one. The other problem is that they've made a list of things they don't prosecute anymore. Like, you can steal things as long as it's under $1,000, you don't get prosecuted for. They have this list of things you don't prosecute for. It's as if the rule of law is now in question. And that's really dangerous precedent for society to set, as we were talking about.
Now, wait a minute. We have 3 branches of government. I didn't know that you could choose and say, well, I don't agree with these legislative decisions, so I'm going to ignore them. How does that make any sense?
It doesn't make sense.
Who gets to choose? I mean, I don't agree with taxes, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I know I got to pay them because I want services, but if I say I don't agree with them,
Yeah.
do I get to just ignore them?
Yeah, it's the rule of law. It's the rule of law. Like we were talking about the driver's license for illegal immigrants, this idea that I'm frustrated by the system, I'm frustrated by the way it works, so I'm not going to follow the laws or the rules. This is America. It would create chaos for us. And we're a developed nation. We need to elect people that follow the rule of law. That's so important for all of us, that we can be frustrated with it, but we still follow them until we get a chance to change them and fix them. So we have a group of politicians in our state that we would call activists, where they get into office with their own agenda, not to uphold the Constitution or uphold the laws of the land, but to create their own. They are what you might call judicial activists, where they have their own agenda and what they want to accomplish, and so they make their own decisions. I just think that creates chaos, and I think that's part of, why you need 2 voices in government. There's one side that's trying to pull you one direction, and another says, well, hold on. We can't go that direction because that doesn't fit our laws. If we want to change the laws, let's do it. But in this race that I'm in for governor, this is a big question because I run against an opponent that really has that judicial activist view of the world, that they want to be activists and change the laws that are on the books, but in policy and in their own through their own agendas, as opposed to through enacting new laws.
Like what kinds of things you think they're trying to change?
Oh, I think there's so many. I think when we talk about defunding the police or changing the way that our educational system works or the way that our children are taught curriculum, or immigration, the one we were just
Chris,
talking
I'm
about.
confused. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I stick my finger in a light socket.
Yeah,
It hurts. Why would I do it again?
yeah,
You know, when I look around the country in Minneapolis and Portland and Seattle, they defunded their police. They dehumanized their police.
yeah,
Now, any officer that breaks the law, yeah, there's part of me that says you get prejudice plus. You know, you should be prosecuted.
hmm
And since you're supposed to be my role model, yeah, you get a little extra.
yeah,
But when crime, you know, because I've seen statistics of crime going up 20%, 30%, why would we follow a model? Why would I stick my finger in a light socket that you already did and you came out screaming in pain?
yeah. Well, as voters, we have an interesting one coming up. It's the graduated income tax. Okay, this has been tried in the 1970s, right? We've already been here. This is where you charge more for the wealthier citizens. So the graduated income tax, as you know, it goes from 5% up to 4% if the ballot initiative goes through. And these kind of soak the rich policies have been tried before. They were tried often in the 70s. They failed every single time because people leave. They go, okay, you know, now I've got an income tax in Massachusetts that's 9%. I can just go down to another state and have income taxes of 4% or 5%. And so they leave. And we see it in our state in so many regards that we are going backwards with some things like that, things that have failed in the past. Here's another one, rent control. Can you believe in Boston they're talking about rent control again? Have we not learned
So
from
they
them?
don't want apartments for rent?
Exactly.
I
Okay,
mean,
but they are having real life discussions about rent control. Remember the 1970s? It decimated Boston, rent control.
well, if I can't make a reasonable return on my investment, I'm just going to sell the apartment I own.
I'll tell you, right now, I was with the Small Property Owners Association. They said a lot of property owners aren't even renting them because they can't evict the tenants. If the tenants don't pay, they can't evict them. How many of us would go into that business, right? So no wonder there's a housing problem. This is just simple economics, is that by doing those types of things, rent control, non-evictions, those types of things, then our supply goes down, we have less to rent, the prices go up, and then there's people that come out and say, okay, we need rent control because prices keep going up. The problems, the solutions to their problems are making it worse. And so, you know, I hope we don't go back to that because rent control was a complete disaster in Boston and throughout really world history.
Well, it only makes sense because, I mean, my daughter's looking for a house. It's a war out there. She's been outbid on like 4 or 5
Yeah.
attempts. If I was worried, like you say, I'm going to rent my house, my apartment, tenant's going to stop paying, I can't do anything about it. As soon as I get a chance, I'm going to sell it. Now all of a sudden there's fewer and fewer houses for rent or apartments for rent.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just, some
Yeah.
things just seem so logical. You know, that the outcome, again, I stick my finger in the light socket, I'm going to get an unpleasant reaction.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, as a candidate for governor, I'm going to do my very best to share this message because it is common sense. It's practical that rent control never lowers prices. It just doesn't. And graduated income tax doesn't bring in more wealthy people to pay taxes. It just doesn't work. And so I hope I can get that message out in a way that makes sense and that voters say that's practical, common sense.
But now I turn around and I say, but wait a minute, what are you going to do about getting more affordable housing? Rent
Okay.
control, is that going to help?
No, absolutely not.
So what do you, I've always believed you can complain about anything you're willing to fix.
Yeah.
So I heard a complaint.
Yes.
How would you fix it?
Okay. So this is what we would call in manufacturing a bottleneck, a supply chain problem. We've all been talking about supply chains recently, which is fun for me because my whole life has been supply chain. If you look at housing or workforce housing, let's call it that, is a manufacturing bottleneck problem, then the question is, okay, what's causing the bottleneck? Like, what is it that causes this bottleneck to increase the supply? And the word is regulations. We have so many regulations. I heard a story from a developer, and I said, tell me about workforce housing. He says, well, I have to negotiate with 4 different agencies in our state, and two of the agencies have to negotiate with each other. He says, we plan on it taking 4 to 5 years to get through all the regulations before we start construction on a project that will take about 18 months to build. So now, as a manufacturing guy who comes from bottlenecks, is we just start pulling apart those regulations and simplify them. Put them all in one department versus 5 departments. Reduce all the inter-department negotiations that have to go on. Then do what we do in manufacturing, which is to put it out to how long does it take. Let's say it takes 4 years to go through all the regulatory requirements to build affordable housing. Let's set a goal in my first term to cut it in half, 2 years. So that's what I would do. I'd say I'm going to measure how long it takes. We're going to go to 2 years. On my second term, let's cut it in half again. Let's go from 2 years to 1 year. That's what I've been doing my whole career, is simplifying things by time, reducing the time. Once we fix the bottleneck and we say, okay, now we've got it down to 1 year to get through the regulatory process, think how much more housing and affordable housing or workforce housing we'd be able to build in our state.
And see, that makes sense to me, because if we don't have enough housing, low-income housing, make more. I mean, it seems pretty simple. I mean, we have programs here in Milford with TIFs where if you'll come and build a building in our town,
Yeah.
I know I'm going to have tax revenue forever. So if I have to give up taxes for the first 3 or 4 years, 5 years, what have I lost?
That's right.
You know, so I can see the idea of saying, we'll give you essentially a TIF. We'll give you a tax break if you build new homes, because that's going to increase the supply and make life a lot easier on people who need to rent. But limiting the supply by telling people to go sell their houses doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Well, so in Massachusetts, a lot of times we try and solve this problem on the demand side, where we give money to the renters, or we try and do things for the renters without increasing the supply. We have to do both. And that's, I think, one of our challenges, that we've been giving money during COVID, and, you know, for those that are most in need, we've been giving them vouchers and helping them with their rent, which we should, because that's needed short term. At the same time, on the long term, we have to increase supply. Now, there are some towns and communities that are doing great. Worcester's doing great. Sounds like Milford's probably doing well. But there are other parts of our state that are not doing well with building enough workforce housing for their demand. And so as governor, I would look at each town almost like a division of the greater state and just say, okay, what's your goal? What's the measurables? What do you need? How do we achieve it? And let's measure it, and let's give you the resources that you need. Now, one of the problems in our state right now is that so much of the money is going to the State House and it's not coming out to the local communities. In fact, the amount of money coming to the local communities has not kept up with inflation. And inflation, as you know, has been 8 or 9%. And you're on the Finance Committee, so you probably get to witness this, that the state gives a certain amount back to the communities, but not enough to match inflation. And so as governor, I have stated what I'd like to do is the same thing I've done for years, which is to go to the State House and say, okay, let's do a 3% reduction every year in the State House. Let's find opportunities to reduce our costs, 3% a year. And then let's start rolling those funds back to the local communities. Because frankly, that's where you experience your real life. You live in Milford, you work in Milford, or you shop in Milford. Why the State House is taking all that money and not giving more of it back to Milford reduces the quality of your own life in Milford. So I believe deeply that what I'd like to do is start reducing the costs in the State House and roll it back to each of the communities. Imagine if I could do this. If I could reduce our costs in the State House 3% a year for 4 years, I could increase the amount of funds rolling back to Milford by about 12%. You could build schools. You could fix your sidewalks. You could fix your roads. You could invest. You could build affordable housing. Think of all the things a community could do with that extra 12%. And so right now in my life, I have to sign contracts that I'll lower prices 3% a year. I'm just so used to it that to go into the State House and say, look, we're going to reduce our costs 3% a year. And we'll just find where the opportunities are. I don't know exactly where they all are, and I don't need to, but the people that work there will.
Now, there's a distinct impression amongst many of the Metro West people that money flows one way.
Yes.
Into the, I can't call it a hole because it's
Yeah.
only a C, but into the 128
Yeah.
innards.
Yeah.
Because it seems, it's like the Mass Pike. We could have paid for that, or we did pay for that how many times?
Yeah.
And the bulk of the money comes from
Yeah.
128 out.
Yeah.
But the bulk of the money goes 128 in.
Yeah.
What do you say to people when they say, will you help balance the flow of money?
I say be frustrated. Be frustrated. Own your frustration, because right now we have a surplus of money in the State House. I've proposed a holiday on the gas tax. The governor's proposed a reduction in taxes. He's proposed all these things. The legislature has said no to every single one of them. I was talking to Chris Sununu up in New Hampshire a couple weeks ago. He said they're on their 10th tax decrease in New Hampshire. They're on their 10th. We have zero.
We tried it once. Didn't we vote to lower the tax from 5.5, and then a year or so later the legislature said, nah,
Yeah.
nah, we're not going to do it.
I think it's fine to be frustrated, because I'm frustrated and we should be frustrated. Right now, 38 states in America have lowered their taxes to counteract the inflation that's going on. In Massachusetts, not only is it zero, but they almost scorn and laugh when we talk about giving some of that money back to the citizens. We have an enormous surplus right now. We could have done a gas tax holiday that even the most blue states have already done. So I'm okay with being frustrated. I'm okay with the citizens being frustrated. We have to get in and fix that. There's no reason for that. Why can 38 other states, even the most blue, give tax reductions to their citizens, and we've done zero?
Well, the people who say they're all for helping the lower income residents, I get confused when I think of the taxes we're putting on gas, because somebody making 20 grand a year, for somebody making 100 grand a year, paying the same $5 a gallon.
Yeah.
But you sit there and say the impact is a lot harder on a 20 grand person than on a 100 grand person.
Yeah.
What's the logic with not helping, especially that we have, I assume the surpluses are continuing.
Yeah, no, they're still continuing. Because of inflation, the economy spiked back from COVID. So, but every state, there's been surplus. It's not just Massachusetts. Every state is having surpluses. It's just the other states are now giving it back to their citizens, and we're not. And maybe because part of it is they don't have to, because the one party rule, they don't have to do it. And so I'm hoping that our citizens vote for a Republican governor and bring in some more fiscally responsible, not necessarily Republican, but fiscally responsible people to the State House that sort of understand what you and I understand out here in our work lives, that this money should roll back to those that most need it, which is all of us. Gas is now at I just passed $5.30 a gallon. People are paying $100 to fill up their car. The other day I was in Market Basket in Bellingham, and I saw this man, and he was an elderly man. He was looking at butter and milk, and I knew what he was doing. He was trying to figure out which to buy.
Which one he can afford.
Which he can afford. And I'm thinking, we have billions of dollars in the State House sitting there, and people are trying to figure out, for whatever their own special projects are. And here's a man trying to figure out, a gas tax holiday. We could have implemented it quickly. It would have happened. Many other states have already done it. We have the resources. So I'm frustrated, and we as citizens should be frustrated that they can't hear us. They just don't think it matters. So it's frustrating. And here's the part that was really frustrating for me. I announced, or I made a proposal as a candidate, that we have a gas tax holiday so everybody can get their budgets accustomed to $5 gas. Within hours, they said, no, we don't want reliance on fossil fuels. Within hours, they didn't even look at it.
But that's like the word coming out of Washington. Increased gas prices are good because it'll have people buying electric cars. I look around the town. I don't see a plethora of people with $60,000 spare change to go buy Teslas or electric hybrids. And so, part of me says, wait a minute, deal with reality. If the boat is sinking, let's not argue about when we get to shore what we're going to do for dinner. Let's figure out how to plug the hole.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And the thing is, I felt like I was scolded. It's like, no, you should buy a Tesla. You shouldn't be driving a gas car. It's like, well, this is America. I get to choose if I want a gas car. And why are you scolding me? And why are you scolding all of us for that? When what we're asking for is a gas tax holiday that wouldn't go forever, just till our budgets can get adjusted. I get frustrated with those. Let me show you another one with you, and it has to do with the price of electricity in Massachusetts. We pay the third highest electric rates in America, okay, about 19 cents a kilowatt. If you go 3 states south of us, 4 states, they're paying about 10 cents a kilowatt, almost half of what we're paying. And you know why? I'll tell you why. We don't produce natural gas in our state, so we have to bring it in pipelines. And so there's a pipeline not far from here, Pennsylvania, and our Attorney General, Maura Healey, sued to block it and said we can't bring it into our state. And then there's another pipeline from the north that we could brought in that she sued and said we couldn't bring that in. And we tried to bring in hydropower, but our northern state neighbors said no, not through
Maine said, yeah, go over me or around me, don't go through me.
Yes, yeah. So what happened is now we have to buy LNG, which is frozen natural gas, and we buy it from Trinidad. So it's natural gas, just like the ones that are in the pipelines. We have to buy it from a country that doesn't use clean technology. We then refrigerate it, which takes a lot of energy. Then we put it into big container ships. We bring it up to our port here in Boston. We unfreeze it. We put it in the exact same pipelines, the exact same product that we could have connected into our state. And because it's on the spot market, when there's a war like in Ukraine, the spot market goes through the roof. Everyone in Massachusetts now pays one of the highest utility rates in America, and we're dirtier. We are dirtier when it comes to the environment. Our purpose was the reason they were sued was to reduce climate change, which is great. But we made it worse by blocking these pipes coming in.
That's something I don't understand. We're all for the environment. So we're going to say no more fossil fuels. So we're going to cut back on fossil fuel production in the U.S. And then we're going to go to Venezuela and say, please increase your production when they're producing it in a much dirtier, much more detrimental way to the environment. I'm confused.
It makes no sense, right? Who? And none of us would do that because it just doesn't make any sense. But you get a press release, you get to be on TV, you blocked a pipeline, you get, I don't know, you feel good. It doesn't make any sense.
But a couple years ago, there was the argument that we don't need the extra natural gas. We don't need the pipelines. Now, 2 years later, gas is no longer at $2 a gallon. Natural gas is doubled or tripled in price. Shouldn't we go back and rethink some of those strategies?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Doughty for governor. It makes no sense because I think people saw this coming. The people knew this was coming because we were cutting off supply and we were converting more and more things to electricity. Electric cars is just one example. And so people saw it coming. I'll tell you a story. Last summer, my factory in Rentham is a big electric user because we do manufacturing there. And we got a call from ISO that said that we might have rolling blackouts, that there just was not enough supply in our state to keep my factory running. Now, fortunately, the heat wave ended And it didn't go. They said if the heat wave went 2 or 3 more days, there might be rolling blackouts. I was in California when I went to a hotel and they gave you brownout bags, which was a bag full of the things that you would need when they had to shut down the electricity. Massachusetts is only about 2 years away from having brownout bags if we don't get more supply in here. So day one as governor, I'm going to go to the new attorney general and convince them that we need to let more supply come into our state. Then I'll go to ISO and say, look, let's work together. We need clean energy. We want to do our part for the environment. But I don't want to be the governor of brownout bags. I would be embarrassed if people said, yeah, under Governor Doughty, we had to get brownout bags because we didn't have enough electrical supply to keep the grid running in the summer.
But we've stopped the supply of energy into Massachusetts. I mean, I'm still stuck on the fact that up until a couple years ago, we were energy exporters. Now we're energy importers. I mean, if we were still producing more oil than we needed,
Yeah,
maybe our gas wouldn't be at $5 a gallon.
that's right. That's right. It's policy. It's policy. Good government policy creates prosperity. Bad government policy creates misery and sorrow. And I'll tell you a story from my own life. So when I was a 19, 20-year-old kid, I served a mission for my church down in southern Argentina. And Argentina in the 70s were ruled by the Perón family, the Peronistas, and they were socialists. And when I got down there, it was at the end of that, a couple years after it. And, you know, as a young guy, I went around for 2 years and just met people in their homes. That's what planted the seed for me, that I saw what socialism does to families. And these policies that are being proposed, they look good. And I was told that when the Perones were elected, there was great celebration in the streets, that it was going to be free everything. Everybody got everything that was free. And they would tax the rich, and they'd tax the mean businesses and the greedy businesses. And everybody was so celebratory. I saw it at the end. And it was a witness of great human suffering as a result of bad policy. I see our state choosing between socialistic sort of tendencies and policies that I believe in a decade will create great misery and suffering, or a more free market, capitalistic, pro-business, pro-energy view and vision for our state. I represent that view. My candidacy represents that view of a free market and pro-business and pro-energy and less free everything. We have to work for it, the value of the dollar.
Margaret Thatcher, in my mind, said it best. Socialism is the most wonderful form of government until you run out of other people's money.
Yes.
I mean, who would
That's
argue,
right.
you know, the theory of Karl Marx, you do what you can and you get whatever you need. Utopia.
Right.
And it worked for computers.
Right.
The old computers ate up more electricity and did fewer jobs than my phone.
Right.
It's only when you put the human element in and you sit there and say, why should I kill myself if I'm not going to get any benefit?
Yeah.
I remember once I was going to my office on Leninsky Prospect in Moscow, the days of the Soviet Union, and there was a group of people standing on the corner every day. I had no idea. It's cold. Why are they standing there? I finally asked my driver, and he said, oh, that's their job, is to work in the factory. I said, what factory? Oh, it burnt down 2 years ago. But they still have to show up every day? And I sat there and said, isn't socialism glorious? They have nothing to do, but the government's decided they should keep working. And you sit there and say, well, in a capitalist society, that would never fly.
Yeah.
Because you'd pay your workers to stay home?
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say that. Didn't we just do that for a while?
We did, actually. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
you talked about increasing education. What ideas do you have?
So I have 3 or 4 specific ideas, kind of day one ideas, but many more will evolve over time. Okay, so day one is the teachers. This, if you looked at the classroom as where production happens, that's where it really happens. It's between the teacher and the students. I want to make sure the teachers are happy and satisfied in their jobs and they're staying there long term. I know in my business, my best workers were the ones that have been there 5, 10 years,
Who love being there.
who love being there. And so, step one for me is to make sure our teachers are happy, satisfied in their jobs. It would be simply just do a satisfaction survey like I do in my businesses. Are you happy and satisfied with your job? If not, what can we do to make sure that you're happy and satisfied in your job? That's one. The other one is to make sure our contracts with our teachers are the right contracts that deal with inflation, that deal with absenteeism, that deal with date time off. In my business, we did a lot of things like we would pay them back if they didn't use their sick days. I know as a father of 6 that substitute teachers were never as good as the teacher. So I want to do everything I can to sort of minimize substitute teachers to have teachers there. That's one. Number 2 is a call line to the governor's office if you're unsatisfied with your child's education or with what your child's being taught. Simple 1-800 number that you can call. There's a person on the line that can get your information. We would ask simple questions. How old's your child? What school are they in? What class is it? What specific are you unhappy with? We'll begin to collect them like we do in my business called customer satisfaction surveys. I want to know from the parents, are you unhappy with your child's education? If I can use a business analogy, do you have Amazon Prime?
Yes.
Okay, do you like it?
Yes.
Okay, if you're a parent in Massachusetts with Governor Doughty as your governor, you are Massachusetts Prime. If you have a kid in school, you're Prime for me. Parents matter like a Prime customer does to Amazon. You get a direct line to the governor's office. You won't talk to me, but you're going to talk directly to the governor's office with any concerns you have with the education. And then I'll look at it. We'll tabulate. If there's a school district that's falling down, or maybe a class where they're teaching things that parents don't like, or whatever, we'll bring in the administrators and say, look, you have a lot of complaints from your parents. Can you go fix this? We'll meet with you next week to see what your plan is to fix it. The third one is extracurricular. I'm a huge believer in extracurricular. As a father, I saw that my kids' mental health was better. They were happier. They were more engaged when they were doing band or sewing or drama or whatever it is their life was giving them, where they wanted to go. As a governor, I want to make sure that every student, of which we have 900,000, I want to know that every 900,000 students have something extracurricular. We'll pay for it if we need to, because I just want them to have that experience of having friends. And I think so much of our mental health problems, at least as a father, what I saw is my children did so much better when they had friends and sports and things they were doing in drama club. And I want that for all 900,000 kids that we have here. The third thing on day one is I want to do an analysis, a gap analysis, we call it, of all the schools in Massachusetts. And it'll take about 3 months, maybe 4 months to do a full gap analysis of our schools to see where we're falling down, the distance from where we should be to where we are. And I want to know, have we had erosion? How much has the erosion been? And how do we compare to the other states? And then we'll just start fixing them one by one.
You know, it's interesting because when you run your business, the bottom 5% of your employees get culled. It's terrible to say, but the fact is,
It's important.
that allows us to bring in new people.
Yeah.
I've heard over and over that you can't do that with teachers. Yet when I talk to the principals, they know who their top teachers are, and they know who the teachers that gave up. Luckily, it's only a small percentage.
Yeah.
What could you do about that low performance level?
Well, I've spent my whole life in this world right here. I think from my experience in life, the majority, 98% want to do a good job. They just need the right motivation, the right training. I'll tell you, I've had employees that have gone through training many, many times. And so, I think most people are trying to do a good job. Now, here's one of the problems in Massachusetts, and that is what I would call overhead. The amount of dollars that we put into our education system that end up in the classroom versus getting absorbed in the overhead. We have one of the lowest rates of investment in education getting to the classroom in America. We absorb too much of it in the overhead. I've seen many institutions and organizations and businesses that have had this same case where it just gets absorbed with the overhead. So as governor, I will track this question and I'll ask every administrator, okay, you need to be near the average. You know, that you can't take all the money that the state is giving you and absorb it in overhead. It needs to get into where the production or where the actual children are being taught.
Can you pull it off?
Which part?
Actually,
We've covered a lot.
Actually implementing changes in the school systems.
Okay, education, absolutely. The governor, it falls under the governor in our state. It's in the executive branch. I hire the Secretary of Education as my hire. The curriculum is set by the governor. So when we vote for a governor, pick a governor that's going to create good schools, because that falls in the executive branch.
And we're spoiled. I mean, back in the Romney days when we actually saw our budgets cut,
Mm-hmm.
I was amazed, because if you had told me this was fact, I would have called it fiction. Our school union came to us and said, we're willing to forego our raises this year if you give us your word that you'll fight to keep all the money we save in the school system. Now, other towns around us were delaying their raises. And I never understood that, because if I can't afford to pay my mortgage today, how can I afford to pay a double mortgage
Right.
in 9 months?
Yeah.
But it just hit me that how fortunate we were. The union came to us.
Yeah.
And sure enough, they gave up their raises that year. Not
Yeah.
delayed them, gave them up so we could make our budget.
Yeah.
So from that end, I think you're starting with an incredible group of teachers. Because it was the unions can propose anything they want. It was the teachers that had to ratify it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, a couple years later, we made up for it.
Good.
It was only fair when we started running surpluses again.
Yeah.
Well, they stuck by us when we were in trouble. It's only fair to give them a little bigger raises to try and make up for it.
Yeah. As a candidate, I've always heard, the teacher unions, the teachers, this and that. I don't believe that. What your story just told me is the story I believe, is that the teachers they're like our most important part of our educational system. We have to invest in them. They're the ones that are on the front line with our children. So I have felt that spirit in my own life, that the teachers they'd work extra hours, they'd buy the crayons, they'd make it work. That's why they're there in that career, right?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, you've had kids. How many hours did you get once the kids hit middle and high school? You're lucky to get an hour or two.
That's right.
I coached their soccer teams because that guaranteed me
You could see them.
3 nights, 3 times a week, I got 2-3 hours with them.
Yeah, in the car.
And here, you're talking about people who spend 6 hours a day with our kids, 7 hours a day.
Yeah, yeah,
I want them to be the best and the happiest.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's, I want everyone in education to know this about me. This is important. I have very high expectations. I'm a man that has very high expectations. I come in and say to the parents, knock it off. If you're not doing a good job with your kids, step up. If you feel like, if you're not stepping up, and to the teachers, I say, step it up. And I say to the students, like I say to my kids, step up, have courage, be brave, do your homework, get a good education. It is competitive out there. It is super competitive out there. To the administrators and the educators, step up. We're not going to have the best educational system in America unless we all step up. Parents, children or students, teachers, and administrators. Every one of us needs to step up. And we can't have one weak leg of that stool. Now, there's some parents where it's a single parent, or there's a parent where English is a second language. There's situations like that. I still say, step up. Spend the time with your children. I can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to teach the division, negative fraction division, right? Parents, we need to have high expectations of parents. If we're going to have high expectations of our children in their scholastic achievements, we need to have high
Well,
expectations
my
of everyone.
daughter educated me because she's a special needs teacher.
So is my daughter.
And she told me point blank, her job is to bring the children up to their capacity.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more, but to bring them up as high as she can. She says, now, being special needs, every child has a different level that they can achieve.
Yeah.
But she said, if I can get them at as high as they can go, she says, Dad, I've done my job. And I sat there and I said, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end, unfortunately.
It's been great. What a great, wide-ranging conversation.
Every candidate that's come on our show, I ask a fundamental question. Here's your chance. Chris, I'm from Milford. Why should I vote for you?
Well, great question. And it's been wonderful to be here. This is just wonderful. I could do this all night with you. So I would say that I have some passions for problems I want to solve. If you agree with me, I'd like your vote. And here's what they are. And we talked about it at the beginning, but let me highlight them again. I want good schools for our kids, and I want parents that feel like they're prime, that they are satisfied with the education. Now, it doesn't come free because I have high expectations of everyone in education. Number two is affordable. We have too many senior citizens that are struggling to live here. We have our young families and working families that are having a struggle to live here. I want to fix that. I want to make it so that we can fix it. I'll do it the way I have my whole life, by breaking all the bottlenecks that we have that are making our state too expensive. Third is I want to make sure our state is safe for everyone. I've been responsible for the safety of my employees for 30 years. I'll do the same for our citizens. And the last one is taxes and spending. We are overtaxing and overspending in the State House and not getting enough money to the local communities where people are experiencing their lives. And so I want to change that. I want to get more money out to the local communities. If you agree with me on those passions and those beliefs, I hope you'll vote for me.
Well, we appreciate you coming on. As always, I've always said I'll never ask you to vote for a specific candidate. Not my place. I'll beg you to vote and to have an educated vote. So get to know the candidates. Pick the one that represents what you believe is important. We've talked about our kids. We've talked about how we spend money, how we save money. Ask the hard questions so you know who you feel comfortable with. And then please exercise the most important right you have, which is to vote. So as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, may God bless, and may tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Thank you. And thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Not too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just